Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining again another Mash and Journey Whiskey Club tasting. We're super excited. This is one that we've been kind of banging the drum for a while and hoping to get, and we finally we finally did, and we're completely inundated with finished whiskeys tonight. So we got what we asked for. We asked if we could maybe do a finish, and Will and everybody over at Barrell Craft Spirits was nice enough to hit us with five very different samples. So tonight will be a lot of fun. We've got obviously some of our patrons and stuff that are helping out with us, which is always awesome. And then our guest, obviously from Barrell Craft Spirits, Will Schragis. Will, thanks for joining tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. And I believe my colleague Ned is coming too, as our brand development manager in Kentucky and Tennessee.
Yeah, so we'll as soon as Ned gets in here, we'll let him in, and we'll kind of get going at things. So I guess before we kind of get started with things, if you don't mind, why don't you just kind of share with everybody a little bit about your background and kind of talk a little bit about the brand.
Sure. So my name is Will Schragis. I was the first full-time employee of Barrell Craft Spirits in 2015-16. And I met Joe when I was actually working at a retail store and auction house a year before that in New York called Schragis. And I had come from the fine wine world, but I had sort of moved into the spirits world in the auction spirits world. And I was fascinated by Joe's vision when he came in to sort of sell my store, the store I was working at, Barrell Bourbon, the first time. Because working at that moment, it was the very beginning of like allocated whiskey craze. It was the moment where you could still get Happy or Mac 18, even though you didn't find it for no reason anymore, but every store had one. They were just raising the price. And the idea of focusing on something being new all the time and the brand being built around how good it was, not around consistency or around some sort of concocted story, really spoke to me coming out of the wine world, because a lot of the world's most famous wines are all about terroir and execution and sort of history of the producer or the family that produces it, without some like, and they looked up a recipe in their dead uncle's boot sort of situation. And Joe, it was then and still is a really wonderful place to work for him. I learned from him like every day and how to really think about brand strategy and what's important, and keep myself focused and keep the team that I work with focused. But when we started, we were just Barrell Bourbon. That's a lot of people think of our company as Barrell Bourbon, and there were the batches 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so on and so forth. And with each batch, we sort of had to start from scratch at the beginning. It was what's available to us. How do we blend something that's really exciting? And at first it was we sell one, and when it's out, when it's gone, and we move on to the next one. But we discovered in 2016 that more powerful than here's the new thing is here's two things at the same time. They're very different. Try them. Let's talk about them. Compare them. And so we started overlapping the batches, where you'd have batch 5 and 6 at the same time, and then 6 and 7 at the same time, so on and so forth. And that was sort of a change in the trajectory of the company, even though it seemed very minute, because at that point we started thinking about, well, we can put together different whiskeys at the same time now. It's not about one batch and then the next batch. Mm-hmm. So we started the Whiskey Batch series. And for people that have followed the company for a long time, we had Whiskey Batch 1 through Whiskey Batch 5. And that was really amazing for us because we didn't have the handcuffs of the rules of bourbon. And so there were all sorts of things we could do. Like, for instance, we did a Oloroso sherry finish on Whiskey Batch 2 that we weren't able to do in the bourbon world. And we sort of developed these two pillars that we built the company on. The first is we're going to do everything at cask strength, full stop. And that it has to do with Joe's just love of cask strength whiskey. His like favorite way to taste whiskey and drink whiskey before he started the company was tasting barrel samples in Kentucky, and he wanted to bring that experience to as many people as possible. And the second was, no matter what iterations we end up doing, we are going to be concerned with making the best thing we can, not be concerned with making the same thing over and over again. Mm-hmm. And as the company has grown in complexity in the portfolio, we try to stay true to those two pillars no matter what. So to be quick about the history of the company, we still had all the batch of bourbon. We get to a Whiskey Batch 5. Some TTB regulations changed, but also the identity of bourbon as a word is very strong in America. But the identity of whiskey is not so strong because there's so many different things you can do under the whiskey moniker or whiskey umbrella. And so we moved what was going to be Whiskey Batch 6 to give it its own identity. We called it Dovetail. And the idea was we would release it once, and it would be the Dovetail, and it was like 600 cases. And we figured it would be a little bit too nerdy, and people would see it and forget about it, and then it would show up in auction. I thought it was going to become an auction whiskey. That was my prediction for Dovetail. And we released it in December of 2017, I think. And it sold out in 2 weeks.
Man, that long ago, that's when that released. Jeez.
17, maybe 18, but I think 17. And suddenly we had this like crisis of identity in whiskey, where in like our portfolio, where everyone was asking us for more Dovetail, and that kind of violated what we were trying to build. And so what we decided was we will constantly produce the ingredients of Dovetail. And each time we want to blend it, we will blend those 3 ingredients to taste. So it's a consistent flavor profile, but it's not a consistent proof.
Right.
The ratios of the 3 ingredients is going to be different, and it's always going to be the best that we can make it at that moment. And if you look at a bottle of Dovetail, I don't think I have one close to me right now, but you can see the vatting number on the very right side of the spline of the label, which is our like Easter egg for people who follow Dovetail and Armida and Seagrass and now Vantage about like which vatting number they had.
Yeah, it's like a tiny little number all the way in the right? Like
tiny. It looks like a smudge.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
And so the reason I bring all this up is because starting in 2018 or so, the fastest growing sector of the demand for bourbon became single barrel because of podcasts like this and picking clubs that had been around for a little bit longer, and stores wanted to have exclusive barrels. Distributors wanted to pick barrels and have them only available in their market. Chain retail getting bigger and bigger and better organized and wanted to have exclusives within their chains. And so we had always done private barrels on a sort of for our friends basis, but they had never been a major part of our identity as a company, and it was growing to be more and more of our portfolio. And again, we hit this sort of identity crisis of we want to be a company that responds to what people are excited about quickly. And the single barrel picking experience and the single barrel unique or exclusive experience was important to us. And as whiskey collectors, we like it too, but it kind of violated this blend first, greater than the sums of its parts, make the best thing we can mentality. And so we created the private release program, which is what we're going to taste tonight, which is our way of making exclusive single barrel-ish size releases like one of our blends, but they have multiple sources. And in the case of these whiskeys, have a secondary maturation. So we use the secondary maturation cask as the marrying cask for the blend itself. So these are Kentucky, Tennessee blends. There's corn whiskey, there's Tennessee whiskey, these Kentucky, Indiana blends. There's corn whiskey, there's Indiana whiskey, there's bourbon, there's rye. Each one is blended to sort of accentuate or balance within the secondary cask. So as we taste through them, some of them are heavier whiskeys than other whiskeys, and that had to do with how Nick and Tripp felt it was matching the cask that it was marrying in. And we've now seen this change where people still look for us for single barrels, but more and more people are looking for us for these private releases, partially because we are being transparent about the fact that they're not single barrels, but are still exclusive picks. But it also, again, it like took those handcuffs off the same way where we work with 68 distilleries around the world. We own thousands and thousands and thousands of barrels. We're constantly working on blends, and we can highlight those assets that we have better in the private release program than we can in the.
I mean, I've always thought that was one of the nice parts about Barrell was it allows you to probably go in a lot of different directions. I mean, you're not just so focused on whether it's bourbon, rye, whatever, and now you can blend and finish. I mean, it really allows for you guys. I mean, it's an endless amount of opportunities to do a lot of different things, which I think in the world of whiskey nowadays is great. I mean, I guess you can be very singular all the way from a bourbon or a rye or whatever, all the way up to the crazy things like, the dovetails and all of that you got. So I think it's a very interesting position to be from the whiskey brand.
Yeah. What the fun puzzle, but also challenge has become for us, and what my job has sort of morphed into, besides working with Ned and other of our colleagues about representing the brand, is thinking about innovation while still thinking about what makes sense for a company growing in the whiskey world.
Mm-hmm.
And if we look at the lessons we learned from Dovetail and the lessons we learned from Armida, the lessons we learned from Seagrass, and now the launch of Vantage, our newest whiskey, which is a bourbon. It's all bourbon. It's all, even though there's no maturation, it's all virgin. So it's a blend of straight bourbon, is the category that it falls into. It's not about experimenting and releasing now. It's about experimenting and then creating programs and then doing those programs for a year or so that we have the stock so that we can release something in a big way. We're not so much interested in having what we thought Dovetail was going to be, this little release that disappears. If we're going to do something, we want to do it in a way where anyone in the country can get it if they want to.
Yeah.
And so that is true of the private release program. We don't have enough for everyone who wants one, but we want to have enough that it's not just like the top store in every state gets a private release and that's it. We want to be able to work with groups. We want to be able to work with podcasts. We want to be able to work with new stores who want exclusive things. And so testing and experimenting, but then honing how to do things in large ways that still are really special is a different challenge.
Yeah.
And it has changed my perspective on which whiskeys that I'm impressed by, because to me now there's beauty in a great single cask, and there's beauty in a great little release that you make 2,000 bottles of and then it's gone. But the real beauty is like, do you have a perspective and identity in a large release? Can you, regardless of the price, sort of bring it to the whiskey world and make a statement with it? And that's just been really fun to sort of, it was a complete flip in, like, for me, what I think is cool. It's like, cool is consistent, like, exciting thing, not necessarily a thing that will never exist again. So it's like our company has like come full circle in some ways.
Well, plus, I mean, I at the end of the day, I mean, I think cool also is the ability for a lot of people to get a lot of your whiskeys. I mean, that's always a fantastic thing. I mean, we're in the day and age where everybody wants limited edition and highly allocated stuff. And, there's so many great whiskeys that are just sitting there on the shelves, or not even that people have the ability to go and, purchase. And that's a really nice kind of refreshing thing, especially from a brand who wants that to be part of the case. So, yeah.
Do we want to get into these just because we've got 5 cask strength offerings and
yeah, I was going to do that. I was going to have Ned, if he wanted, just kind of tell a little bit about what he does with Barrell, and then we'll kind of get into it if that works.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Sorry, joined a couple minutes late. Ned Anderson, based in Louisville, Kentucky, where home base is for Barrell Craft Spirits. I joined the company. We're about 8 days shy of my 2-year anniversary now. So it's been an awesome 2 years. Crazy to see this company just sort of grow in the way that, coming on board sort of almost late in the company since we've been around as long as we have, but just watching the sort of exciting growth and all the innovation and everything we've done in the last 2 years. So joined on as the brand development manager for Kentucky and Tennessee, and have sort of morphed into this, I guess, almost a little bit of a hybrid role of sort of hosting as we're sort of coming out of COVID, and we're enjoying more people kind of coming to Louisville, coming back to the city, picking barrels, looking us up, saying, hey, we love what you guys are doing. We want to interact with you all, and I'm
Ned
your guy.
is being a little modest about this. For everyone else who works in sales, when we have our most important and or most difficult customers who tell us they're going to Kentucky, Ned hosts them for us. And also dealing with like our facility, if any of you have seen it, is not built for tourism. It's a working factory, and so it's like navigating when people can go in and when they can't, be it because of COVID or because there's too much going on. And then finding ways to create experiences in Louisville for people that are visiting. Ned, it's amazing how many people like specifically love you in the whiskey world around the country now. We get emails all the time, like whiskey dinner in Seattle, Washington, and they're like, "Oh, also like we'd love to have Ned if he wants to come." Someone has to be like, Ned's busy in Kentucky. Like,
Yeah. Hey, it sounds like a tough job, but someone's got to do it.
Yeah, somebody's
That's
gotta
exactly
do it.
right.
All right. So
I really don't envy Ned at all, but I do want to thank you, Ned, personally, from on behalf of Scott and myself, just for being able to provide all these amazing samples for the club. We have about a little over 1,000 members at this point now, and I think everyone's really excited to get to actually try some of these because based on what I've tasted in the past from Barrell and some of the other private selects I've had, they could just be absolutely just remarkable. So can't wait to get into these, and really thanks to both of you for coming on and for procuring these really great barrels, which we're about to get into a bunch of cask strength finished stuff. So
thanks for giving us a little bit of whiskey we can taste. We've recently, I'm not going to mention any brands, but recently we've been given some samples. We literally have like a thimble of whiskey. Like we don't. I won't get into the other brands or anything, but I appreciate what you guys sent us. So
that's actually really a good example of sort of Joe's vision. Our company does not make inexpensive things. We do only cask strength, and the least expensive thing we see is Stellum, which is $55, $59 on the shelf. And these are all $99, $109, $120 bottles when they finally get to retail or to consumers. And having the attitude of we are going to present something that we feel very strongly as being a fine whiskey in a fine way all the time. Our final interview for our company is you have to present our whiskey to anyone in the company that wants to come to the Zoom, which is insanely intimidating to someone who doesn't do the job.
Just a little bit, just a little.
7 people who have been doing it for 2 years. And so it is, even though it happens with on the road, you bring samples and you can't have a new one for everyone all the time. When we're keeping samples out, I appreciate you saying that because it's very important to us that people get the experience of making these picks virtually that they would get if we were in person with them, which would be us doing our best to roll out the red carpet. And so,
we appreciate it. That's for sure. So
we appreciate we have a lot of strength whiskey to taste.
So I know that you guys have done a lot of picking, probably even more than I have. But if I can give my 2 cents about getting to the bottom of this tasting, we should spend as little time possible on the things that are not going to win.
Okay.
So, if I think everyone should take a minute to sort of nose through all of them.
Oh.
And then we can try to kick 1 or 2 out so that if it's the answer is not, is this the best? It's does this have a chance of winning or not? Then we really spend the time making the pick between the things that are in the running or aren't. I find when you try to analyze all 5, you end up either loving the 5th because you're toasted by the end, or forgetting what you liked about the beginning, and you don't end up giving equal weight to all of them.
Yeah, I mean, generally we taste all of them, and we'll there's usually pretty clear standouts right away. But we can dive in. So the first one we're trying, guys, is a barrel whiskey, and just by the way, all of these are Kentucky, Indiana blends, correct?
Yep.
And they are blends of bourbon and rye, all of them.
Bourbon, rye, Indiana whiskey, and Kentucky corn whiskey.
Oh, interesting. Oh, okay.
The oldest whiskey in them is 18 years. There's a good amount of 14-year Indiana in it. And then the bourbon and the rye are often a little bit younger. They go in last. They're when we want to either spice it out or beef it out.
All right. Wow,
that's really You'll notice some of them are a little bit more full-bodied than others, and that's because Trip felt that they needed a little bit more body. They were showing as too hot.
Yeah.
And though it is not exact, those are often the ones that have a little bit lower proof too. Because
so first one we're trying, guys, is a Pedro Jimenez sherry finish PX cask. So
this one for me is coming off a little muted for like a normal PX. It's not as in your face as normal PX is.
Got a really nice spice factor though on the palate. I mean, it's really just it really
with the spice. I mean, on the nose, I get that nice PX, like that grape raisin note. Love it.
Yeah, a little bit of pepperiness too.
Yeah, definitely some pepper. That's for sure.
And how can we forget? We need to thank our patrons, Robzilla, the Claw, also known as Steve Holtzclaw, for helping out with this pick as well. So really, thank you guys for supporting us and for coming on and helping out.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, appreciate it very much. Well, this was like we had talked about this forever and wanting to get people involved, and that's part of the deal. So thanks, guys.
Yeah. And thank you, Barrell, for help put this together. I was going to show off my barrel collection, but I'm relegated to the garage with 2 kids, so I don't want to set up a break back here. So.
Yeah. The one that I have closest by is a Seagrass 20-year that's hiding under my cabinet here.
Yeah.
There's a new release of that, the like new blend, same specs, but slightly different proof that's coming out a little later this year.
Yeah, I bought the 16-year Seagrass, and damn, that thing is a beast. So
good.
It's
a hell of a whiskey, that's for sure. For me, so far, the one that's standing out the most is the Armagnac. It's got the most, the nicest, most developed nose to me. So.
I don't have enough whiskey glasses because I'm here in my hotel room, so I'm just trying to work through these here.
As far as the Sauternes go, can you kind of tell us a little bit about the process that you guys kind of run through, just so we kind of have a little bit of a little more familiar as to your process of this?
Yeah, so we work with a lot of different finishes, and certain barrels are easier or harder to get into America. And so Sauterne barrels are usually, there's a lot of new oakers of Sauterne, and so they turn over pretty quickly. They're not that hard to get your hands on, a couple of them, but they come into the States sort of off and on. And so we have a couple of Sauterne producers that we have the barrels of, but with each private release, after we bottle it, we will take some of the bottles of Sauterne from that year, from the like current release, and recharge the barrel with it and roll it around and then pour it out and then blend back into that barrel again. Okay. And so what's interesting is that the oak influence gets a little bit smaller each time we do that, because the first time it's actually the first time there's spirit in it, and then it sort of becomes more and more neutral, though it stays very Sauterne forward. And Sauterne is an interesting, actually, really all of these, because these are all wine finishes except for the Armagnac. Sauterne's an interesting finish because Sauterne's a very acidic wine.
Right.
And it brings not only sweetness, sweet wine, but it brings some acidity into the blend as well. And so you wind up with these kind of brighter, sometimes sweeter whiskeys that cover proof really easily. And so, like, what's interesting to me about the Sauterne blend is, I think it actually is the highest proof of what we're tasting, which most, as I was saying before, probably means that it didn't feel like it needed to be beefed out by oaky or whiskey as much.
And it doesn't nose like it's the highest proof either.
Yeah, it doesn't read as hot at all.
Wow, the Sauternes and the sherry are actually coming off the most aromatic, I think. The Oloroso sherry, I'll say. Even more
I would agree. The Oloroso stands out more than the PX does. But man, that Armagnac and that Madeira, I mean, those two are like, for me, they're standing out the most. But the Sauternes as well. But man,
I'm not getting much on the Madeira yet. The Sauternes though is an absolute beast.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting.
It's very kind of like fruit forward, or like, some apple and pear, things along those lines. From
the patrons, start with Rob Zilla. What are you getting on the nose on these? What are the standouts to you?
So definitely the Sauternes has the more exciting nose, I guess I would say. Maybe it's just because proof as well. I mean, it's got a lot more going on. I like that. The Armagnac, I kind of agree with Scotty. The Armagnac does stand out a bit.
Yep.
And then the other one that stands out for me too is the Oloroso. Those are the three for me. The Madeira, I've had mine open for a bit, as Scotty has too. And so ours has opened up for a while. Yeah. And the Madeira is starting to actually have a nice nose too. So I'd kind of like to revisit that one on the nose after you guys have had it opened up for a while.
Yeah, our Madeira hasn't been open too long, but yeah, it's starting to kind of develop here. Yeah, I mean they're all Cameron Lockern in the chat. Okay, Sauternes the winner, Armagnac the winner.
Yeah, we got a lot of winners so far. So
the Sauternes just has like this candied sweetness to it.
Yeah. But I'm getting down the Oloroso too. The Oloroso is an absolute.
Yeah, those two are ridiculous. It's like the Sauternes and the Oloroso are just.
Yeah, those are. I mean, we don't get these to nose them, so we're gonna have to drink them.
Yeah, fair enough.
Fair enough. So, right. Will and Ned, what do you guys think on the? What are kind of the few standouts to you on here? If you had to pick like a top two on the just go based on nose. What are you drawn to?
Are you asking me or other people?
Will and Ned.
So I think my quick two and maybe a third were the Oloroso Sherry, the Cercial Madeira, and the Armagnac. Just really digging the noses on those three. The Armagnac, the spirit really kind of leaps out of the glass too on the nose. Very expressive.
Yeah. What about you, Will?
I try to stay neutral on these things till the end, but
all right.
I really like the grapiness of the Madeira. I agree that it is a little muted, but I've been tossing them around in a stem glass while I'm tasting them, and so I think that I probably get a little bit more sort of quickly than someone who's coming out of the Glencairn, which takes a little longer to open up in, I think.
See, for me, the final three is what's standing out to me the most in terms of overall like nose. Like I like the Oloroso and I like the Sherry, but for me, they're being trumped by the other three, by the Armagnac, the Sauternes, and the Madeira. For me, But
I think I agree with I think all of us are drawn to the Sauterne immediately.
Yeah, for sure.
Some combination with other things. I happen to love Madeira matured and Madeira finished whiskey, just kind of across the board, and so it's always in the top couple for me. But I also really like the Oloroso. I think the Armagnac for me, as much as I love the whiskey, Cercial, to me, those are somewhat similar in their being a little sort of grape-y. And Cercial, to me, I like the freshness of it a little bit more. But but I would say the three standouts to me are the Oloroso, the Sauternes, and the Madeira. Though I wouldn't kick any of them out of my house.
Yeah,
for sure. But I mean, you can nose them all day, but if it doesn't match up to the palate, then it really doesn't matter.
All right. So which one do we want to taste first? Which one?
I think everyone. Let's go down the line. I think let's sip the PX first and see how we do. So.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah, it's very sweet. It's very grapey. It's like a slight hint of like chocolate, milk chocolate, not dark chocolate.
Yeah,
I can see that. There's probably more rye in that than I would guess.
Not a lot of pepper or rye spice.
It's very, very peppery on the palate for sure.
Yeah, that rye. There's like a rye raisin finish on this thing. That's really nice.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. That's for me. That feels like that's more rye than.
Yeah.
And it lingers.
Yeah,
the lingering on the middle palate.
Yeah,
it's just sitting there on the back of the palate. That's nice.
Yeah.
I think Jason, you've mentioned pop rocks. You like that, on the palate, that kind of pop rocks hit. I get all pop rocks, not the flavor of pop rocks, but kind of the sensation,
but
right?
That's the effervescence.
Yeah, that's the sensation. Almost like it feels like it's carbonated in a way.
Yeah, right. It's bright. Now to me, like it almost tastes like for me, the sweetness that's kind of in the like maybe towards the finish is like that light whiskey or something. There's that sweetness that kind of like to it.
I would agree. If you go back, when I go back to the nose on it, Scotty, it's like you almost get the corn forwardness of it.
Yeah.
Now the PX, I feel like the PX hits you more on the palate than it does on the nose. The nose, I feel like it's getting dominated a little bit by the corn.
Yep.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
See, And I think the pepperiness of it is also taking a little bit away from the sherry finish that a lot of people I think like. But that's me, so.
That's like first sip on that, and I've had a starter whiskey that's somewhere around 105, 108 proof, and that one definitely is. To me, it's a little bit more peppery than what I was expecting from the nose by itself.
Yeah,
I think especially when you're having to like focus on that, like the lingering pepper spice continues to just stick around there, and I think while the sherry influence kind of goes away.
Mm-hmm. All right. So notch that one there. I have my notes here. Let's go to the Oloroso. Wow, way more of a finish influence there.
Yeah, definitely less sweet, more of the cherry influence for sure. Less pepper, still some sweetness up front. I think you get that corn or that light whiskey effect, but you still have that lingering sherry effect on it, which is
it's got like the viscosity of that one is so much better.
Yeah.
There's so much more body in that.
Yeah.
What's interesting here too is Oloroso sherry is not as sweet a wine as PX sherry is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I get more sherry influence on this, but not in a residual sugar way, in a like oxidative nutty way. It's
exactly.
It's like more sherry whiskey to me, but it actually doesn't read as heavy a finish.
You absolutely just took the words out of my mouth. I was like, this is more nutty. It's got kind of that like that Oloroso sherry, that little bit of like a mustiness to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
with the kind of with the fruit and the nuttiness, it's really more impactful too.
Yeah, I think it's night and day when you compare the two sherry finish ones by far. So.
Yep.
It's and Dusty made a good point. It's kind of what did you say?
I get more on the front and mid palate than I do on the back. I get a ton of flavor on the
it's on the very front and then it's just gone.
Mid, and the
it's kind of a little bit of a reverse of the PX where we're getting not too much in the front, but it was all happening on the back. Well, this is a little bit of the reverse, even though I think the Oloroso finish is a lot more intense.
The balance of it is very nice.
What just blows me away is the difference in viscosity. I mean, like even look at it in your glass.
There's a lot of oils going on.
Definitely for sure.
The sherry one just. It just grips to your palate. It's nice.
Yep. No, that one. Yeah. Out of those two,
pretty refined.
Yeah, it seems like there's like less of a blend of like lighter whiskeys, like less. What am I thinking of? Like less viscous. There's more in the Oloroso than there is in the PX.
Yeah, I'm with you, Scotty.
Yeah, I agree. Finish is excellent. Nose and palate are very, very similar, if not identical, right?
Yep. So I'd come back to that one and have more. Like if I was going to line them up out of the two we've had, I'd drink that one again.
Can we eliminate? Do we think we can eliminate the PX at this point, or are we gonna?
Yeah, I think we could. I'm been willing to. I just think overall it doesn't have the full, experience.
I appreciate the quick axe.
It's just a little like one dimensional when you're focusing on one particular part of it. It's
all pepper.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't mind me jumping into
sweet pepper.
That for a second. Blind Squirrel just commented on the glasses that I have. These are the Riedel cordial glasses, and I get made fun of on our sales team for being fancy about my glassware a lot. They're not one of the more expensive fancy glasses.
Will hold them up to your camera fully so we can see them.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a nice glass.
Oh, those are really good.
Great.
And the bell on the end.
They're probably like $15 each, so they're nice enough that you don't want to ruin them. But they, the top of it is basically the shape of Glencairn, but it's smaller. And it is my favorite glass to drink like a half ounce of whiskey. So if I'm going to sit in front of my bar and taste and be like, visit things that I haven't visited in a while, I feel like I can, or do a single barrel tasting, I can really like get the full experience of a whiskey without pouring out 1.5 ounces or 2 ounces of it.
Yeah.
And that's why I used to do this in Glencairns, and then in the middle of the pandemic, as a keep everyone on the sales team motivated because we were locked in our own houses, we actually sent out Zalto cordial glasses, which are like $70 or $80 each.
Oh yeah.
Great
Wow.
when you get them wrong.
Fancy.
And they were fun for us to taste together because we'd like release Gray Label bourbon and we'd send everyone the barrel or like the bottle and then a Zalto to taste it with. And I don't get as good a like read on the whiskey out of them, even though they feel very fancy. And this I've gone back to these because of it.
I was gonna say those fancy ones you were talking about. I must have missed my shipment. I thought they were coming with all the. I'll check that. I'll check with my mailman. So
Yeah. Be happy
File
to
a claim with FedEx.
samples, Scott.
yeah, man, I absolutely love the nose on the Armagnac. Talk about like chocolate and a little bit of that grapey influence at like kind of slightly. You don't get quite the funk as you do like on a well, no, I would say there's probably more of a funk on the Armagnac versus the cognac. So I like how this is kind of ramping up, but it's not full on like funkiness.
I'm getting a lot of ethanol coming up the nose here in mine, but man, yeah, it's chocolatey. It's definitely grapey, but in a much more darker way.
Yeah, it's definitely darker. I really like the chocolate part of it that's coming on this one, and I guess because like Rob and I, like we had ours opened up, we had ours poured a little earlier, so maybe that's influencing a little bit of what it is we're nosing too. But it's for me, it's a beautiful nose. Like if I want a nice Armagnac finished whiskey, like this is like in my wheelhouse right now.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it's very nice.
It's very nice. This is probably more of an.
Oh, it's even more viscous.
Yeah.
It's a very elegant whiskey. There's just a lot of like little layers to it that are coming through without being overly like punch you in the face.
Mm-hmm.
Now on that, I wish there was a tad bit more spice to it. Like it's falling a little bit flat.
Yeah, it's very front forward on the tongue, and then it seems like it kind of degrades a little bit as you go further back.
I agree. The finish on this is a little bit disappointing. I wish it kind of has a little bit. It kind of sneaks up back on you after you kind of wait a second.
Yeah, just a little residual heat.
Yeah, but the flavors are nice, and I don't know if that residual heat is kind of a little bit of the product of the ethanol that I was getting on the nose, just a little bit more alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
But
see, and maybe yours just needs to open up a little bit because I'm not picking that up at all.
Yeah, I just cracked mine, and if you close your mouth after you take a sip and breathe out of your nose, you'll get that ethanol.
Yeah, it's in there, man. It's hot. It's not hot, but I'm definitely getting alcohol.
That's I think for me really opened up like the baking spices.
Yeah,
cinnamon, some nutmegs.
Yeah. I just man, it's like man, I love Armagnac. We've been dying to get something Armagnac, but this isn't. For me, this isn't really doing it on the palate. Like even more than I still think I like the sherry over this.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I hadn't moved it forward. It's sitting on the
A/B testing. I'd pick the sherry.
Agreed. I still feel like there's more almost body or consistency to the Oloroso than there was to the Armagnac.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's also interesting because they're almost identical proofs.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting.
Yeah, for me, like everything holds up except the finish. Like I want a little bit more spice. I want a little more spice there, but it just kind of falls a little too flat. It actually makes you want to keep going back to it, as much as that sounds weird, because you're constantly searching for like what may be coming, but it never quite gets there.
Scott and I have talked about that. It's like, well, we go in and we're like trying a finish. Like when we were at Starlight, we're tasting barrels. We have to try the cognac and the Armagnac. We're like, we got to keep trying it. Is it going to hit with the way we want? It's like, damn it.
I know, you start to sound like desperate at some point, but I mean, give me what I want yourself, So, all right.
The one thing I can say for the Armagnac though is it does hold up with multiple sips. It does stay consistent. Where
it
the
definitely
PX first sip was like, oh, okay. Second sip was like, So the Armagnac definitely holds up and stays consistent with multiple
and the
sips.
other thing I think with that is, I mean, it definitely doesn't drink like 121 proof at all. Like it drinks way below that proof point. So I don't know. All right, well, let's move on. Can we move on to the
It
second?
has a nice consistency to it. think it has a nice balance of sweet and spice, but it just kind of lacks on
finish.
the finish. But the consistency is there for sure. Mouthfeel is pretty nice.
Yeah, but I mean, I would
But
even
then-
I would still give the Oloroso the one up
Yeah.
on flavor, finish, and even viscosity. I think the Oloroso kind of comes out too a little bit.
Agree.
Yeah, the balance is much nicer there for sure. So,
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so this one impressed everyone on the nose.
Let's see if it holds up.
We're going into Sauternes. Let's see how it holds up in the palate.
Sauterne.
Damn.
Ned, since I know there's a lot of unicorn chasers that tune into this, of all of the crazy picks you've done in the last 2 years with people in Kentucky,
there's way more of a finish on that.
is there one that sticks out to you as like you were there when they picked it and you loved the barrel?
oh man.
Gosh, I think that Verdeo Madeira finish that went to Sealbox, I want to say, was one that I had in a set and just kind of fell in love with it, and had that sample sitting at home and was just sort of slowly kind of sipping on that over the course of about a year or so, just kind of savoring it. And then that one popped up there with Sealbox, I think earlier this year. And that's been maybe my top kind of all-time favorite. Also, one of the barrels that Tarek, who I saw today down in Spring Hill, just picked for Elixir, the Post Parade Cabernet Sauvignon barrel.
And then the finish.
Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. Will and Ned, do you guys have any personal? I know, Will, you had mentioned you really love Madeira finishes. Ned, is there something you gear towards, and what have kind of been your favorite barrels that you've had?
Yeah, so it's the two of those that I just mentioned, the Post Parade Cabernet Sauvignon barrel, as well as one of the Verdeo Madeiras. It's been pretty fun with this program, and this is, this is the fun program, really. But we've done sort of this progression of different styles of Madeira that's been really cool to see, and kind of taste those as we evolve through the different series of releases here, and sort of taste some of them side by side within the series. I think it's just it's a category of wine that we all have just sort of gravitated towards as a company. And one of the maybe second or third class that we did as a brand as well. We used to do these really fun sort of wine and spirits classes when we would have these private releases, and we were doing projects like Seagrass and Armida and things where we'd kind of explore the world of that wine or spirits type and get everybody with the company on a Zoom, send samples out, and just kind of talk through the process of creating these wines or spirits and all the different styles and things. So it's kind of fun to go back and see. So now you know about this category. How are we applying that in the whiskeys that we're blending and that we're bottling every day?
Yeah.
Man, that sucker is dry right there.
Very. That's what went through my mind. It's like it's so drying.
I mean, I don't mind it, but I know talking to a lot of people, like it's a huge turnoff. Like when it immediately dries your palate out.
Yeah, and it's like instantaneous too. It's not even like it creeps up on you. It's just done.
That Oloroso sherry I keep grabbing that one, right?
Yep, and that's what I just did.
I keep grabbing that one.
Gosh, man.
Ned, can you, without derailing, could you just briefly touch on Seagrass? Because it was such a avant-garde, I mean, I have backups for backups of Seagrass, and like, it was just, it's such a thing. It's one of those things that I like in life. If you look at it on paper, you're like, that won't work. And then if you experience it, you're like, this is incredible. Right. So can you just briefly touch on Seagrass, like the brainchild of that and how it came to market?
So what was really interesting about Seagrass in the development of it was when we launched Dovetail, we had blended it before we had the name Dovetail. There was we made the whiskey, and then it's like, how do we talk about it? And the same thing happened with Armida. We had Armida finished and was like, what do we name it? How do we talk about it? Seagrass was conceived of in early to mid 2020 when we couldn't really be together unless you were like wearing a mask and going into the facility. And the way that we developed whiskeys changed a lot because we didn't have the ability to just sit around and shoot the shit and experiment as much. And so Seagrass was developed as a concept before we knew what the finishes were going to be and how we were going to formulate it or execute it. And the concept was America does not have a coastal whiskey.
Yeah.
People drink whiskey next to bodies of water all the time.
Right.
But if you look at the motif of what we consider American whiskey, it's very cowboys, horses, Old West, Texas whiskey. If you look at the names of whiskey companies, they're not aquatic in any way. And you look at things like Talisker, the coastal whiskey. It's like you feel like you're like on the cliffs looking over the ocean when you're drinking Talisker. And you look at all of these rum brands that are obviously so coastal and so aquatic. And so the thought was America has coastlines and lakes and rivers and such that are everything from tropical to snowy. So how could we put a whiskey together that felt like the whiskey to drink if you were sitting inside and you were looking at like hail over the ocean, or if you wanted it on the rocks in Miami Beach, or if you were on a boat like at a lake? What would we need to do? So we thought about like, we want this to be a little bit salinic, but we also want it to be kind of sweet and tropical. And we want it to be lighter because like oak in the heat is kind of difficult sometimes. We want it to be cocktailable. Like even though Seagrass is an expensive bottle of whiskey, it actually functions as a cocktail ingredient, I think, better than anything else we make. And then towards the end of the summer in 2020, at that point when I was visiting Kentucky and when we were getting together, it was like everyone has to quarantine for a couple days before we can see each other safely. And so we had these like lock-in nights of like, okay, we have the concept, but we don't know what's going to be in it yet. And we had a night that we finally decided on the apricot brandy finish, which we had done in the private release whiskey finish before. So we had a lot of private release whiskey series before. We had a lot of sort of samples of things that we had in apricot brandy. And it worked really well with the Madeira as a like grapey oxidative note that it allowed the apricot brandy to really show as the fruit. While still highlighting it. The agricole finish really was used because rum funk and rum Kogener is so good on finished whiskey. Rum finished whiskey is just kind of objectively so good, but rum agricole is so grassy that it gave this like tropical salinic note. When I left that blending or so, we had decided on the finishes to some extent, but it wasn't a rye yet. There were whiskeys in those test blends. And then later in the year, Nick and Tripp, when they were polishing it, started doing those tests on exclusively rye. And so Seagrass actually started as a whiskey and it became a rye whiskey as after the finishes were decided. And so that was this idea of a concept whiskey rather than a blend first whiskey, which we hadn't really done before. But immediately when Seagrass was launched and it blew up, we couldn't keep Seagrass in stock for the first like 6 months that Seagrass existed. And we put a lot of barrels down on Seagrass. Even to this day, we said it creeps up on us and we get it like we won't notice, and it like sells out places. When we were designing Vantage was to some extent a concept whiskey too, because we want this to be a classic bourbon for bourbon drinkers if they're looking for a bourbon, but we want to expand what's possible in the canon of bourbon without leaving the canon of bourbon. And so that became the like brief on Vantage. And though it's not that we were always going to do experiments and then release them, it has changed the way that we make whiskey a little bit, because it's not thinking about what we have, it's thinking about like what do we want to have, and then figuring out how to get it. And it like changed our development stages a little bit, which is cool. Seagrass was I hope really influential whiskey in the like scope of the whiskey world, but for us internally, it was an extremely important moment in our.
I think it was a whiskey that really like opened up a lot of people's eyes to a lot of like really like multiple finishes. Like it was it was to the point where nobody had, I think at the time, like any idea what that was going to be like. And then as soon as people tried it, the reaction was like, I'm not exactly sure what I'm tasting, which is kind of a cool thing. And then it was people, I think quickly you realize, well, I kind of dig like this Frankenstein kind of whiskey, because that's kind of what it was like when you know, talk to a lot of people. The reaction was, I think, whoa, like I don't even really know how to react to it. And then people realize, well, I really like the uniqueness of that. So
if you look at Dovetail, Armida, Seagrass from us, they all have like one very aroma driven finish, and they have one finish that has acid presence for that acid sugar balance, at least one. Some of them have two, and they all have one sort of distillate cogener focused finish to them. And it's about like, we are producing each one of those 3 ingredients for each one separately. There's 9 whiskeys that go into those 3. Now with Vantage, there's 12 whiskeys that go into 4 releases. And we're actually doing the first set of blending to make them very singular, so that they can bring what they need to bring to the blend at the end better. And so we actually have to push all of the ingredients out of balance first, so that we can then bring them back into balance in like a louder way when we finally bottle it.
That Madeira finish that you guys have, that's a badass whiskey right there.
This last one,
the Madeira on the nose has finally opened up for us, and I'm getting this really like nice mix of like hazelnut, orange, berries, and man, that's. And
I've got what I've got written down is like chocolate, raspberry, nutty, with a slight amount of dryness, but in a really nice spice. It's got, I think, great balance like all the way through, from the time you sip it to the finish. It's very well balanced.
I love that raspberry. I don't think I would have placed that, but it's
it's definitely raspberry.
Like,
there's a nice like kind of mixed berry vibe going on.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And it's not overly dry.
There is some dryness. It's not as much as the Armagnac, though.
Agreed.
Yeah. Or so the Sauternes, for that matter.
I guess to ask you guys, like, as far as, you know, all the Robs and everybody involved, like, is it too much? Is it too much dryness, or are you guys okay with kind of that profile? What are your thoughts? Any Rob, just take the.
Rob.
Rob
Garage, you go first.
Yeah.
Garage Rob.
So
that's what you are now. You're now Garage Rob.
Garage Rob. I've been called worse, trust me. So on the Madeira, I mean, I think it drinks below its proof.
Yeah.
One thing I'm getting on there is anytime you have any baked good that has fruit in it, like baked fruits, not so much baking spices, but baked fruits, that kind of finish when it comes out of the oven. I'm getting some of that on there. It doesn't bite back. You know, I like whiskey sometimes. I want to go in this direction and I want a high proof and I want it to bite back. This one drinks below its proof, right? The nose matches the palate. It's easy. You keep going back to it. The finish is what you asked about. I think the finish is great. It's there. It lingers. It's consistent. But it's not all over the place, right? It's not burning you down. So I like it.
All right, Robzilla, you go next.
So I agree with what you're saying. What you're saying about the fruit with the baking, it's almost like a fruit leather kind of a consistency, like a jam crust or whatever. It's like I don't know how to describe it. Concentrated. I get a little more oak in this than I have in any of the rest. We haven't mentioned oak at all tonight. There's been no mention of oak in any of these. And this one, I get some oak, and I think that's where the drying's coming from a little bit. In this one, I bet you this has got some older stuff in it. But it's not too drying. The Armagnac's too drying for me, honestly. Even though it starts off and it's mouthfeel in the front of the palate's good, but it dries too much. This one, the what is it, Madeira.
I think
it's balanced. It's definitely balanced, and I think that the finish is great.
The sweetness of the Madeira lasts longer into the palate than the other ones do.
Yeah.
So I agree that there's some astringency. The Madeira and the Armagnac are the oakiest of the two to me.
Yeah.
It's like the sweetness pulls farther into the oak in the Madeira than it does in the Armagnac to me. In the Armagnac, the oak grabs it quickly, and that's actually true of a lot of Armagnac that Armagnac that is left in the barrel for longer. You actually get this like tannin wall at the end of the mid palate sometimes.
I would agree. I think Armagnac I probably get the most oak.
I mean, I think part of that oak that Robin mentioned and Rob's mentioned, like I think part of that oak is definitely showing up on the finish, and I think that's helping to like make the finish part of it longer. It's allowing that baking spice and that sweetness and the fruit to kind of just like linger on the palate for me anyway.
I know the Madeira the Madeira for me and Dusty, we're kind of like discussing it, and like for me, it's all mid to back. I'm not getting a lot in the front because it drinks so easy. As to Rob's point on how I feel like it drinks below its proof, which but I'm not getting like that explosion of flavor in the front of the palate. I would like it all develops mid to back. The mid palate and the finish on the Madeira is really great. I'll even forgive the little bit of dryness it has because I think it has a really great finish to it. But it's missing a little bit something on the front of the palate.
Yeah.
But I think all of these that we've tried tonight have a little bit. They're all somewhat balanced. I just think a couple have more balance than others.
Yeah.
It's very animal farm feel.
Yeah, Rob,
I still keep coming back to that
oak now.
Oloroso.
I'm kind of breathing out. I'm getting some of that oak now, right? So it was there. I just didn't pinpoint it. So good point.
Yeah.
So are we ready to eliminate like maybe the Armagnac?
Yeah.
I think all of us agree.
Would anyone be upset about eliminating the Armagnac? And I think the Sauternes too. It seems like everyone is on either the sherry or the Madeira.
I would agree. I think it's
I agree.
Yeah, that's how I got it right now. So.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
It's definitely down.
I had high hopes for the Sauternes, but it did not work.
Yeah.
I mean, the Sauternes might have had honestly the best nose in the night. Besides the sherry. I mean, that Sauternes nose was unreal.
Yeah, it just didn't hold up. It just ended up being just super hot.
All right, so we are between Oloroso sherry finish. That in the end, it's like that. These Oloroso finishes sometimes can just be magical. Sometimes these Madeiras. Oloroso 121.74, Madeira 120.78 proof. So both of them are pretty close in proof. It's really down to what we got here.
Yeah.
Oh, man, they're both so different, which is nice.
Right.
I like that about it.
Yeah. And I think partially like what's kind of like in my mind with the Madeira is that there's not a lot of that. It's slightly different profile than what you get with some of these other ones,
I gotta go finish though. I mean, honestly, I'm with Jason when it comes to that. I'm kind of a finish whore, to be honest with you. Well, the finish on the Madeira just to me, it's so much better than the Oloroso.
I agree.
The Oloroso is good. It's got a nice peppery finish, but the Madeira just opens up. It just becomes this nice enveloping finish.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
I think
it's like a good, kind of fruitcake, and then it just.
Honestly, like when you taste that Oloroso and then you taste the Madeira, it's like night and day from my standpoint. Like the Madeira just completely overshadows that Oloroso by far.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
And I ain't mad about the little bit of drying. That's okay.
I think it's got a great finish. I mean, that kind of chocolate, raspberry, nice baking spice. The spice lingers, slight dryness again, not as much as the Armagnac.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the Oloroso crushes the Madeira on the nose, but as far as the palate though, I think the Madeira hands down wins the over the Oloroso.
I think the Madeira, for people who are ultimately going to buy this bottle, also probably would show better like on the rocks. And the Oloroso,
I can see that.
Just because of the fruitiness of it, I think I'm going to push a little bit down. But
yeah, like on the nose, I mean, the Oloroso is just giving me all those really nice cherry vibes. The Madeira, I feel like it's there, but you kind of have to search for a little bit more. But on the palate, I think the Madeira gives way more of an experience than the Oloroso does.
What are you nosing out of right now, by the way?
Two Glencairns.
Oh, you are? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. And you think the Madeira is flatter than the Oloroso in nose wise?
Oh yeah, nose wise for sure. I get way more.
Really?
It's not about like
Yeah.
it's not about like the flavors I'm getting. It's about the pungency, like how strong the flavors are.
Like,
I'm getting
is the Oloroso brighter to you? Is that what?
yeah, like Dusty and I are getting way more on the Oloroso than the Madeira for sure.
Yeah, it's so much brighter.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think you've got one where it's like light and bright versus like that deep and dark.
Yeah.
You know.
I also, just because someone made this joke, Justin Jenkins in the chat, I do not mean this in a salesy way. I just want to make sure you know that our policy is when someone is tasting with us, they can pick one or any amount of the barrels. And so if you would prefer to...
Here we are again.
And I really don't want that to be like me trying to sell you 2 barrels. I just want to make sure you knew that.
Well, let me ask you this: how many bottles do we yield usually out of one of these?
I can actually tell you. I believe these are both been bottled, so I could tell you what they are.
I'm halfway tempted to mix them together and see what happens.
Yeah, right. I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah,
man.
And I don't mean to throw a wrench into everything. I love both. I really do.
Yeah,
me too.
They're different nights.
The Oloroso. Yeah, the Oloroso is a little bit more. I think the palates. They're neither one of these are going to be considered bad. They're both great, but the Oloroso I grab more. The finish with it is consistent. I get a little bit of cherry that pops up. Both have great viscosity, but that cherry shows up a little bit mid palate. Nothing burns you up, nothing burns you down, nothing is drying. Maybe a little bit on the Madeira but it's not in a bad way, right? So for my palate, I'm only one of 5 votes, but that Oloroso is excellent. So
I'm actually going to double check because it looks like I may have just made your mind up for you, because the yield on the Special Madeira is very, very low.
What's low?
I'm double checking. I'm going to look at like the actual inventory numbers to make sure.
Damn it, Scott! Why do we keep picking low yields?
Mixed together, they're ridiculous though.
Yeah. I mean, this may honestly help our decision making.
Get both of them. Yeah.
So Rob,
I'm blending them.
Yeah, they are fantastic when they're together.
Yeah,
ridiculous.
So, Rob, you're leaning towards the Oloroso. Just real quick, Robzilla. Well, actually, I don't think it really matters at this point. Will, tell us the numbers here.
So the sherry is 228 bottles, and the Madeira is 58 bottles.
Okay, that answers that question.
That's the story of our lives right there, dude. We always pick
economics always win.
Always.
Yeah.
I mean, I think at this point, I mean, you can't pass up 58 bottles. There's no way we can walk away from 58 bottles.
This is fantastic.
The
Madeira is so special.
I love the turn that this just took. And it's rare that I look at the yields, because these are blends, and so the fact that it's yielded so low means there was probably a leak while it was doing its secondary maturation.
There's not even enough bottles for our tier 1.
No.
So My
That means
friendly
we're buying two?
unsolicited advice is, we mentioned earlier, you have, in a bad way, you have to keep going back looking for something. In this case, these are both great, so you have to keep going back looking for bottles if there's only 58. So I think the Madeira should have a Where's Waldo sticker to some extent when we do the Madeira, right? Because you have to keep looking for bottles, right? So, yeah.
I don't know. Does Barrell allow stickers?
We need to inform you that secondary market stickers are against the rules.
Okay.
We will have nothing to do with it.
Okay.
Quick question. Is this already bottled?
It's already bottled.
Bummer. Do you guys do 375s?
I was going to say you could if you blend them, they are totally ridiculous.
We don't do.
Are they?
Yeah.
what I think is important that everyone knows is anyone in the tier system of the liquor industry can't change a bottle and then sell it again. So when we're producing it, we have to put on what the cola is,
Right.
The label. Same thing for the distributor, same thing for the retailer. What a person does when they own a bottle of whiskey and they have opened it is their own business.
Sure.
But as I'm sure you guys saw with what's his name, the horse owner. If too many people poke the bear, some people are going to start coming down on them. And so, my advice to everyone is do what you want with your whiskey, but don't do something that's going to ruin the fun for other people.
Yeah, we're getting to the point now. We're getting to the point now where we're going to have to start releasing 100 mil.
Jason, you had a sip of the blend. What do you think?
I think for us, first of all, if you blend the Madeira and the sherry, it's ridiculously good. Yeah. On another level here, we would say that we're gonna have to take both of these. We can't take Madeira as a favorite just because there's just not enough bottles. We'll have to get the sherry as well, and I think I'm
sorry about that.
With that,
it's okay.
This doesn't happen with private release whiskey, so I didn't even think to check. But I'm glad it came up on the podcast.
Yeah. That blend is excellent, by the way. That blend is really good. I'm not just saying that. That's excellent. If I'm buying both,
I'm sure 58 like bottles within a barrel is probably adding to the richness of the Madeira for sure.
That blend is great. Yeah.
That might be
so good. That is so good.
Can I say something here real quick?
Yeah.
So I've got a blend to get inventory coming out the Thursday, right? So I've been playing with blends for a while. And it's like, how often do you take something where you're like, if you add this to this, it'll be great.
Yeah.
And it works very rarely.
That's good.
Oh, yeah.
And these two,
they work. They really work.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, listen, we don't want to encourage everyone to buy one of each because we want to try to get as much bottles for the group as we can. Sure. So I'm just saying. But yeah, I think for both of these, overall, both of these are really, really just delicious barrels. I mean, both of them are complex. I think the Madeira has some of those more pronounced like dark flavors with some of that raspberry note, which is just beautiful. The Oloroso kind of gets into the cherry, the chocolate. Yeah. It's a little bit brighter. I think both of them are absolute winners. So if we have we can get both those barrels, we'd be all about it.
Both great.
Fine by me if it's fine by Ned.
Yep. Yeah. Sold. Thank you. Both great. And again, the blend, someone's heard me rant before that a lot of my not daily, but if I grab something is I grab a blend, right? Some rare breed and Russell's 10 is one of my favorite things to blend. But this together, Robzilla is excellent. So great recommendation. I just did 50-50, right? Of the last two.
Me too.
So do what you want with your whiskey. Do what you want with your whiskey, but the 50-50 from the panel is excellent. So
I mean, the blend on this, considering like the yield would be like, well, a strong 3 parts like Oloroso, 1 part Madeira. Like that's one hell of a blend. I mean, sounds like we're working on a bit of a dovetail here, kind of deal.
Yeah, going down that path.
I don't know if that's a possibility. But all right, so Jace, are we in for both of them? I don't think we can walk away from that.
No. We got to have that Madeira because it's really good, and I think the Oloroso is going to definitely be a group favorite with how much how many flavors as it just keeps opening up, it's just getting better and better, and I think the Madeira is going to do the same. So, I mean, this is just incredible, finished whiskeys from Barrell Craft Spirits, and again, thanks to Ned for pulling these and Will for coming on and kind of guiding us. This is a really great tasting, and can't wait to bring these bottles to the group.
Yeah, it was one that we've really wanted to do for a while, and we've kind of been chasing it, and I'm glad we were able to finally get it kind of put together. So yeah, Will and Ned, thank you for
having us anytime.
Definitely. So, all right, so I think we've got it. We've got the Madeira. So like, is there something a little bit different about like in terms of the total like name of this? Is this anything different or than regular like Madeira? Because you've got
so this is a Cercial Madeira.
Oh, okay, all right. I saw that. I wasn't exactly.
Is that Is that still because Madeira's mostly come from Portugal? Is that a
So
is it still Portuguese Madeira?
All Madeira comes from the island of Madeira, which is a Portuguese island, but it's actually off the western coast of Africa.
Yep.
And in Madeira, though there are, I think it's like 7 or 8 different grapes that are used, there's 4 main grapes of Madeira. Cercial, Verdejo, Boal, and Malmsey in that order of sweetness, with Cercial actually being the driest style of Madeira, and Malmsey being the sweetest style.
Okay. All right.
So we now have made finishes with each one of the varietals because they're sort of different styles of fortified wine.
All right, cool. Good to know. When I saw that, I wasn't familiar with like what that was. So I'm glad you were able to kind of let us know a little bit more about that. So, all right, guys, there you go. So thanks to Barrell Craft Spirits. Thank you guys. We really appreciate it. Made another hell of an experience. That's for sure. So I'm glad we were able to kind of put this together. So, and then obviously thanks to all the patrons. Thanks you guys for all the support. Thanks for being part of it. Everyone watching live, watching the replay for all the tasting notes. We get it like later on once we release the bottles. Everyone like floods the live stream. What it was we were kind of like talking about. I'll have to do the same thing too. We have to like go back and watch this stuff to figure out what in the hell we were tasting. So, but Jace, you got anything you want to add at all?
No, again, just thanks to Barrell Craft Spirits for putting this together for us. We're hoping this is one of, or I should say 2 of possible many picks coming down the pipeline for us and for our group, because I think once our group tastes these, they're just going to want more and more. So really thank you guys. And honestly, thanks to Joe Beatrice and for connecting me with you guys and all the innovation you do. And we just can't wait to see what's next for you guys. Aside from the picks, we can't wait to see what's coming from the pipeline for all the consumers out there. So cool. Thanks for what you do, guys.
Yep. Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in tonight. Greatly appreciate all the support from all the patrons. Thanks, guys, for being part of it, and more importantly, thanks to Will and Ned for being on tonight with us and kind of giving a little bit of a breakdown of what all the whiskeys we were tasting tonight. So thanks, guys, and we'll see you when we see you, I suppose. So cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.